Hello, hello, hello. Hi, team. Got a great poll question today on this Wednesday at smirconish.com. In efforts to shield President Biden from scrutiny over his health, because there clearly were, right? In efforts to shield President Biden from scrutiny over his health, were his aides primarily engaged in rationalization, or was it deliberate scheming? I'll differentiate between the two in a moment. First, thank you to Parks Casino. Hey, they just announced the classic rock band Kansas headlining the Excite Center at Parks Casino Saturday, October 4. I have to tell you, when Kansas left Overture, when that album came out, that was a game changer for me. It's funny. I remember very specifically being at a party way back in the day when that was played on a loop, just played on a loop at a particular Carry On Wayward Son. Wow. I still listen to it. Comedian Joey Diaz, so many other headliners. Ashley McBride, Taj Mahal and Kebmo, Gary Clark Jr., comedian Mark Norman, KC and the Sunshine Band, UB40, comedian Russell Peters, Australian Pink Floyd, Bill Murray and his Blood Brothers. Yes, that Bill Murray, comedian Brian Regan. Whatever you're looking for in terms of entertainment, get out and mingle at Parks Casino. Dinner and drinks before the show, gambling after. What more could you want? ParksCasino.com to buy tickets for all shows. Parks Casino, this is how you win. You've got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hey, let me begin by thanking the 35,318 who voted yesterday on the poll question at smirconish.com. If Democrats retake the House in the midterms, will they impeach President Trump for accepting the Qatari jet? 57.4% said yes, 42.6% said no. Yesterday, post-radio program, I moderated a continuing legal education seminar in Philadelphia, open to lawyers nationwide, because we attorneys have a continuing legal education obligation. You've got to have 12 credits per year in order to keep the license intact. And candidly, a lot of the CLEs are boring. Ours was not. Ours was terrific. It was just hard to plan because the subject matter was Trump 2.0, the first 100 days from a legal perspective. But the legal issues have so rapidly changed. I'll give you a great example. Our friend, veteran criminal defense attorney William J. Brennan, was tasked with the discussion of pardons. Why? Because he represented a lot of the J6ers. And yet that seems so much in the rearview mirror, does it not? Danny Savalos, guest host for me here, talked about birthright citizenship. Caroline Pelosi, who's an ABC legal analyst, talked about mass deportations and the Alien Act. Our buddy Ellie Honig talked about executive orders that have targeted law firms. Elliot Griffin talked about DEI and EEOC policies of the Trump administration. Neil Makija, who's been a guest on this program, talked about DOJ. I talked about transgender service members and the ban by the Trump administration. And then we had one cancellation due to illness, a fellow by the name of Joe Hill, who was supposed to talk about the politics of it all. So yesterday, as we were preparing to begin and we were behind closed doors and I was with my fellow attorney panelists, I asked them, how should we fill the slot that Joe was going to fill talking about the politics? And I proposed that we talk about the Qatari jet. And the consensus of the panel was to say, there's really not much to say. In other words, the consensus of the panel is that it was so clearly, or is so clearly, if accepted, a $400 million gift from the Qatari government, accepted by our government, DOD, the Trump Library, however you want to see it. The consensus was that's a violation of the emoluments clause. Danny Savalos had a great comment. He said that Trump has tested him as an observer, as a legal, pundit, by raising issues that revolve around arcane notions of the law, like the Alien Enemies Act of 1789. Danny said, I think when I became an attorney, I'd never heard of the emoluments clause. And the rest of us, we all agreed. On the issue of the Qatari jet, a very brief update. A couple of Republicans have found their voice in the Senate questioning the propriety of this deal. They include Senate Majority Leader John Thune. They include Senator Rand Paul. Quote, I do think the jet probably sends the wrong signal to people, and I don't like the look. Senator Ted Cruz, noting Qatar's financial support for Hamas. I also think that the plane poses significant espionage and surveillance problems, so we'll see how the issue plays out. That's the point that I made yesterday. I mean, the whole angle here by President Trump is that Boeing can't complete the two that he ordered, the two Air Force Ones that he ordered in Trump 1.0, and he wants to fly in a bigger, badder plane. I mean, look at him in Saudi Arabia today. As I'm speaking, I'm monitoring his visit in Saudi Arabia, now having moved on to Qatar. He is being treated like a king, and he loves it. And he's commented on how their planes are bigger than his plane, and he wants a bigger plane. Well, this is his way to get a plane. But I said, because of the outfitting that will need to be done and because of the security considerations, I'll bet he'll never get to use it. NBC, I'm looking at their report right now. Converting a Qatari-owned 747 jet into a new Air Force One for President Trump would involve installing multiple top secret systems, cost over $1 billion, and take years to complete, according to 3 aviation experts interviewed by the NBC News folks. So that's the current state of affairs. Last night with Hannity, Trump was still defending the idea, quote, now some of my people say, oh, you shouldn't accept gifts for the country. And my attitude is, why wouldn't I accept the gift we're giving to everybody else? Why wouldn't I accept the gift? To be continued. Today, the Wednesday poll question at smerconish.com. And I have to tell you, a funny thing happened to me. When I voted, I was the tiebreaker. The poll question today is, in efforts to shield President Biden from scrutiny over his health, were his aides primarily engaged in rationalization? Or was it something more sinister? Was it deliberate scheming? When I cast my ballot, it was 37-37. Obviously, I cast my ballot early in the morning. I became vote number 38 for the proposition that it was rationalization. Only 75 people in total, I was number 75, had voted. Now several thousand have voted. Big books come out on Tuesday. Big books come out on Tuesday. And when I say this now, you'll remember that I told you this, and you can monitor it. Big books come out on Tuesday, and yesterday there were a flurry of reports about this new book, Original Sin, by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. Jake, you know, from CNN, Alex Thompson from Politico. Both have been guests on this program, and I've been making reference to Original Sin because most recently I posited the idea that the reason that the Bidens, both Joe and Jill, made their first post-presidency joint appearance on The View last week, I said, is to blunt the reaction that's going to come from this book, because people have been saying that this is like, you know, the book that's going to paint the picture of what went on among family and friends and senior staff of the Bidens to shield Joe's diminished mental and physical capacity from the public. So all these reports came out yesterday, and I said to myself, geez, it's a Tuesday. Wait a minute. Did the book come out? No, the book comes out next Tuesday. But advanced copies began to leak, and Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson published an excerpt in The New Yorker, and that's what sent everybody, you know, to the presses writing about the book and looking, as they often do with big releases, for the most salacious details. I don't have my copy. I have read that which is in the public domain about the book, including the excerpt from The New Yorker. And I have to say, I've not seen anything so far that surprises me. And I've not seen any evidence so far that would cause me to vote for deliberate scheming in the poll question today. Do I believe that those around Joe Biden were aware of his diminished capacity? I do. Do I believe that they tried to protect him by having him work primarily a schedule of 10 to 4 for the heavy lifting? and make sure that there are no, late night commitments and protect his travel schedule. And so I do. Yeah, I believe all of that took place. I don't see any evidence. I don't see any evidence that there was like a major mishap, that there was a major faux pas that took place that was a holy crap moment. Oh my God, if the public ever found out this, we'd be doomed. I don't see it. Again, I haven't read the whole book, but the lists are already out. I mean, there's a list I'm looking at from Mediaite contained in today's newsletter. Explosive new revelations on the decline of former President Joe Biden came to light on Tuesday ahead of the publication of Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again by CNN's Jake Tapper and Axios's Alex Thompson. Several outlets have published comprehensive previews of the highly anticipated new book, and The New Yorker ran a lengthy excerpt. The splashy new information has generated even more buzz for the book ahead of next Tuesday's release. Here are the 5 most shocking tidbits. Okay, let's do this. Number 1, Biden's top aides tried to hide him from his own staff. That's the headline on this. Quote, among the techniques used by top aides, limiting urgent business to hours between 10 and 4 p.m. I don't know. I'm nonplussed by that. Top Kamala Harris campaign aide goes scorched earth. This is interesting, but there's really no substance here that causes me to say, oh, and they shielded the public from this event. It's David Plouffe, who ran the Obama campaign back in 2008, saying, quote, we got so screwed by Biden as a party. Plouffe added that the truncated campaign was an effing nightmare. He put the blame squarely on one man. It's all Joe Biden. He totally effed us, says Plouffe. Okay, interesting revelation that Plouffe thinks that Biden got out too late. By the way, I always believe there should have been a truncated, blitz primary at the time, but that's not revelatory to me. It's a good headline. Plouffe is pissed, but it doesn't tell me anything I didn't think I already knew. Obama had to rescue Biden numerous times during star-studded fundraiser. Okay, you remember the LA fundraiser, June 15, 2024? We Zaprudered the tape where Obama seems to escort Biden off the stage. This is a discussion of that. Quote, Obama didn't know what to make of how his former running mate was acting. At one point in a small group, a few dozen top donors, Biden began speaking, barely audible, and trailed off incoherently. I've seen it. We've all seen it. Biden aides discussed putting him in a wheelchair. Interesting. Having already taken measures to accommodate his physical limitations, such as keeping speeches short so that he wouldn't have to stay on his feet and using the short staircase to Air Force One, close Biden aides thought about going even further. They talked about whether he should use a wheelchair, and the decision was they couldn't do that until after the election. Dr. Kevin O'Connor, the White House physician at the time, warned that a Biden fall could possibly make the wheelchair a necessity. The biggest, that which is getting the most attention, revelation from the forthcoming book next Tuesday called Original Sin. And this is the one that the excerpt in The New Yorker spends the most time talking about, is that Biden didn't recognize George Clooney. Now, I'm going to probably be in a minority on this, which is just fine with me. The gist of this, and I'll read a little bit to you in a moment, but the gist of The New Yorker is that Biden knew Clooney superficially, but knew him over a period of years. He had been an activist relative to Darfur. He had meetings with Obama and Biden, had crossed paths with Biden infrequently, but on a couple of occasions in the years since he was vice president, meaning when he was out in the wilderness while Trump was president, and then while he was president. And like the presentation is pretty much like, well, everybody knows George Clooney. Like, wouldn't you know George Clooney? Of course you would know George Clooney. And George Clooney was with Jeffrey Katzenberg and with other Hollywood stars. He was the headliner at the fundraiser, the aforementioned A-list. Julia Roberts was the third. That's right. Katzenberg, Julia Roberts, and also George Clooney. They were the headliners for this fundraiser in June of 2024. And apparently, Biden has to be told that it's George Clooney. Biden, who has just stepped off a plane from Italy after a G7 summit, and on 4 or 5 hours sleep, they say he couldn't sleep on Air Force One. He only got 4 or 5 hours of shut eye. He's a guy who needs 8. I'm a guy who needs 4 or 5. And he didn't immediately recognize Clooney. And I am not the president of the United States, but I meet lots of people. And one of my deficiencies is names and sometimes faces. Usually I recognize the face, but all of a sudden I'm struggling for the name. I guess what I'm trying to tell you is I don't put a lot of stock in Biden's diminished capacity because he didn't recognize George Clooney. I just don't. And by the way, let me just remind everybody, I believe he should not have run. I am not a Johnny-come-lately. I said it on radio. I made it clear on television, and many of you didn't want to hear it from me. My hands are clean. Everybody else is talking about Alex Thompson and Jake Tapper and like, where were you then? And they have a defense for that. They claim they were reporting on these things. I don't know what they were doing. I only know that I was here upsetting many of you because I was saying that it's not in the country's best interest that Joe Biden, he'd served his country well. I think I would, refer to Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold him and know when to fold him. He stayed in the game too long. And candidly, and it's sad, he still doesn't get it. He still doesn't get it because the two of them went on The View last week thinking like, we're going to go on The View and we're going to show the world, that Joe could have stayed in and could have won. And then instead, when he was asked a question about his diminished capacity, he trailed off and she had to finish for him. So he shouldn't have stayed in, but I don't see anything nefarious in the reporting so far. I don't see anything that surprises me. I don't see anything that's new. I don't. And that's why my vote was in rationalization. Now, what do I mean by that? In efforts to shield President Biden from scrutiny over his health, were his aides primarily engaged in rationalization or deliberate scheming? Rationalization, to me, I'm the one who worded the question, means that they saw Donald Trump as an existential threat and that they were looking the other way and rationalizing those things that to the person who wasn't in the inner circle would have been alarming. But if there were something that had occurred, that the call came at 3 a.m. and they just wouldn't put Joe on the phone because he was some incoherent, dementia-induced babbling idiot, I'd feel differently, and we'd have that conversation. Instead, to me, it's just sad. The people close to him did him a disservice. And even, I'll say this, and even if they had, and maybe they did, maybe they did try and talk him out of it. He's stubborn. Like, he strikes me as a guy who is stubborn as a mule. I can say that. I'm stubborn as a mule. So that's where I come out. Okay, one last thing, if I may. From the New Yorker, this is the excerpt that Alex Thompson and Jake Tapper wrote, the Clooney discussion. Clooney first met Biden, top Democrat in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in New York City after the terror attacks in 2001. Their first meaningful conversation came after the actor became a credible voice advocating against genocide in Darfur. By the time of the 2024 presidential race, the actor had known Biden for decades, had known him well for 15 years, had last seen Biden December 4, 2022, when Clooney was in D.C. with his wife, Amal, to be celebrated at the Kennedy Center honors. Apparently Biden, oh, there's Amal Clooney's husband. I can see that kind of a joke line. Clooney then gets leaned on by Katzenberg and Julia Roberts, like, hey, we got to do something for Joe Biden. We need to put together this fundraiser. Donald Trump is such a threat. They end up putting the gig together, and it becomes the most successful American political fundraiser ever, $30 million. I did not know that. And then it talks about what happened at the event. What happened at the event? President Biden arrives. He hobbled from around a corner. Clooney knew that the president had just arrived from the G7 leader summit in Italy that morning and might be tired, but holy shit, he wasn't expecting this. This is what the book says. The president appeared severely diminished, as if he'd aged a decade since Clooney last saw him in December of 2022. He was taking tiny steps, and an aide seemed to be guiding him by the arm. It was like watching someone who was not alive, a Hollywood VIP recalled. It was startling, and we all looked at each other. It was so awful. Thank you for being here, the president said to guests as he shuffled past them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Clooney felt a knot in his stomach as the president approached him. Biden looked at him. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. You know, George, the assisting aide told the president, gently reminding him who was in front of him. Yeah, the president said to one of the most recognizable men in the world, the host of this lucrative fundraiser. Thank you for being here. Hi, Mr. President, Clooney said. How are you? The president replied. How was your trip? Clooney asked. It was just fine. It seemed clear that the president had not recognized Clooney. That's it. That, to me, what is the biggest thing from the book I've yet to read, but based on many who have and have come up with their like salacious lists, it's that Biden, fresh off a trip from Italy, having slept for 4 or 5 hours, admittedly at an event headlined, yes, I'll say it, by one of the most recognizable people in the world, apparently didn't put 2 and 2 together that this was George Clooney. Go vote. The poll question at smirconish.com. In efforts to shield President Biden from scrutiny over his health, were his aides primarily engaged in rationalization, or was this deliberate scheming? Like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe, and set yourself up for notifications. I appreciate you. I really do. Thank you for watching.